Kashin Koji won't teach Boruto to master Sage Mode. Or rather, Sage Mode isn't really relevant in this era anymore. And yeah, that's a bit of a controversial opening, but that's just how it is. I'm Nim without the E. Let's talk a little about Sage Mode. Oh yeah, maybe if you've heard some theories that Boruto should master Sage Mode now or in the future. And of course, I'm one of those people who have the idea or theory that Boruto should master Sage Mode. After thinking about it, I found a hint or clue that Boruto shouldn't master Sage Mode. But disclaimer guys, in the end, this is just a theory and speculation from a Boruto addict. But I do have my reasons. First of all, after we saw the flashback between Koji and Boruto, especially when Boruto created a teleportation technique similar to his grandfather's, I think Ikemoto wanted to build Boruto's character to be more like his grandfather than his father, Naruto. From the beginning, how Boruto's character was built, especially after the time skip, Boruto actually resembles his grandfather more than Naruto. After Koji revealed that Boruto is a genius for successfully creating a version of himself in the Hiraishin technique, this also supports the idea that Boruto shouldn't need to master Sage Mode. Because of course, Boruto, Naruto, and Minato actually have different fighting styles. And do you know why Minato never used Sage Mode when fighting? Have you ever thought that Boruto and Minato might actually have the same fighting style? First, I'm sure you still remember that the reason Minato himself didn't use Sage Mode was because Minato himself admitted that he wasn't very skilled at using that technique or jutsu, because the time needed to balance or gather natural energy was too long. According to him, if he tried to use Sage Mode in the middle of a fast-paced battle, it would slow him down, and it's clear that the technique doesn't suit his fighting style, which relies on speed with the Flying Thunder God technique, also known as Hiraishin. Secondly, if we look at how Boruto fights, especially after the time skip, he uses speed techniques too much, starting from defense, attacking, and even dodging every attack from his opponents. This is not to say that Boruto is better than Naruto or vice versa, but with evidence that Boruto looks calm when fighting and relies more on speed with Hiraishin, he really resembles his genius grandfather. Isn't that right? On the other hand, there are certainly many scenarios that make it seem like Boruto doesn't master Sage Mode. One of them is his agreement with Momoshiki. Yeah, you know what I mean? If you think about it more deeply, is Sage Mode more worthwhile compared to borrowing Momoshiki's power? Beyond the context of whether Sage Mode will be revealed or not in the end, I'm sure you'll agree that if we compare the power of Sage Mode and Momoshiki's power, which is alien-like, Momoshiki's power is far superior to Sage Mode. Logically, if Koji knew that Sage Mode had a chance of defeating the Shinju, Boruto wouldn't need to make a dark deal with Momoshiki. His physical strength should have been enough to face Jura using Senjutsu power. But at this point, what do you guys think? On the other hand, there are some things you should already understand if Ikemoto doesn't want Boruto to master Sage Mode. We know that Koji has seen several possible futures regarding Boruto's abilities, meaning if Koji can see Boruto's future, he should know whether Boruto has the potential to master Sage Mode in the future or not. And believe it or not, the first jutsu that Koji truly trained or perfected was Hiraishin. It's no coincidence, and I'm sure it makes sense. Koji prioritized Hiraishin because it's the only jutsu that's really useful for Boruto right now. You know, with Boruto's position, he is certainly a target for Konoha because he is a murderer, a traitor, and also a target for the Divine Tree Man. His existence is truly threatened, where he could be caught at any time if he is caught off guard. So, if there are worst-case scenarios that Boruto isn't prepared for, Hiraishin is the perfect technique for him to escape. Because, once again, as a fugitive targeted not only by Konoha, but also by the Shinju, Hiraishin is a priority jutsu that Boruto must master from the start. But if you ask whether Kashin Koji didn't see Boruto's potential to master Sage Mode in the future, I don't think so, because the battle between Boruto and Jura in the Land of Wind is proof that Boruto really doesn't need it, or more precisely, that Sage Mode won't really be useful. At this point, Uzuhiko, which comes from the planet's chakra source, cannot really defeat Jura, regardless of how the output power is not so maximal or something like that, but this should be a benchmark that Uzuhiko, which I'm sure we all agree is stronger than Sage Mode, has not really been able to provide a significant effect on the damage received by the opponent. But do you think Senjutsu Chakra is stronger than Planetary Chakra? Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy answer, right? However, I admit that assessing whether Sage Mode will truly be useful in the future cannot be done simply with this theory and analysis. Because in reality, Sage Mode is not only about output, but also the physical condition of the user, which you surely know increases for every Sage Mode user. It doesn't matter how big or small your body is. If you can master Sage Mode, then no matter how heavy the load you lift, it won't really be a problem. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? So with increased physical strength, your techniques will also get a pretty significant boost. But like I said earlier, it can't be judged that simply. Times have changed, and the ninja world is no longer like it was in Naruto's era. It's not just that the enemies are getting stronger, but Boruto, as the main character, certainly has strength characteristics that, if you did a poll to determine whether Boruto is stronger than his ancestors like Ashura or villains like Obito and Madara, you would surely confidently say that Boruto, with his current mode, is stronger than them, right? And as a final conclusion, first we have to know whether Boruto really needs to master Sage Mode or not. And to determine this, of course, we also have to know whether Boruto's physical strength is already at a level far beyond Sage Mode itself. However, if I may give a reasonable explanation, I think Boruto's physical condition is already at a level above Sage Mode. The reason lies with Uzuhiko. With a technique that has such massive explosive power, the user should not be in a physically weak position or anything like that. Because in order to contain such a large amount of chakra or energy that it can create such an extraordinary attack, it is impossible for an ordinary shinobi with not very strong physical strength to contain or maximize this technique. This means that every output of power should be accompanied by the physical strength to match. Yes, that's how it is. Moreover, Boruto's fighting technique is very similar to his grandfather's, where speed is the most important thing. If we look at how Boruto fought in the Land of Wind against Jura, it is clear that Boruto's fighting technique is similar to Minato's. But what I think most strongly is that Boruto's fighting technique is very similar to Minato's. Chapter 12 is proof that truly convinces me that Boruto is really similar to his grandfather. Also, when comparing the time required to gather natural chakra and planetary chakra, we should be convinced that Uzuhiko is more worthwhile, right? But again, in the end, this is all just a theory and analysis, and not necessarily the absolute truth. But if you have a different perspective or reason why Boruto should master Sage Mode, let me know in the comments. So yeah, thanks for watching, likes and subs. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Databayo.